we're on. Welcome, everybody, and welcome to our wonderful panel here in our Sustainability Lounge here at the JCU Ideas Lab in Cairns, where we actually have two historical UNESCO sites at our doorstep. We're very, very lucky. We have obviously the Great Barrier Reef and also the World Heritage Rainforest, the Daintree Rainforest. So we are streaming in from this amazing, wonderful place on Earth, and I feel very, very honored. So I will be the moderator today. My name is Dr. Samantha Horseman. I'm the innovation facilitator for JCU. And as you know, JCU spans across Australia and also Singapore. So we're very fortunate to have an amazing panel today that represents our campuses. In addition, I'd like to also welcome the participants that will be joining us in our Impact 10X United Nations Sustainable Development Goals event launching on August 30th. So, this panel is an objective to the launch of this event, and we have brought the best of the best. Now, that before I head into the introductions, I first would like to do the acknowledgement, and I'd like to also start with the opening that we acknowledge Australian Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the first inhabitants of this country, and we pay our respects to the traditional owners of the land on which we stand today, present, and past. In the spirit of reconciliation, we also acknowledge the valuable contribution that Australian and Torres Strait Islander people continue to make to the James Cook University. So, welcome to our panelists. I'd like to do some introductions and then hand the floor over to our esteemed panelists for their thoughts, insights, and also call to action around sustainability. So, first, I'd like to introduce Professor May Tan Mullins. May is the Dean International. She is also the Chief Sustainability Officer in Singapore. Welcome, May. Next, I'd like to introduce Irene. Irene Pollock is the chairperson for the Circular Economy for Far North Queensland. Welcome, Irene.
Thank you.
And I'd like to introduce Garrett. Garrett Swearingen is the president of the Nature and Adventure Collective here at the Student Association Group at JCU, as well as a environmental management student. Welcome, Garrett.
Thank you.
Great to have you all here. And I know that we're going to have a very rich discussion on sustainability. And I'd like to actually pose the first question. And as I mentioned, I have put in the chat here all the questions that we'll be going through with our panelists. And I'd like to direct the first question, if I may. And I'd like to also call on May for this one. In your opinion, what do you think the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals mean to you? That's the first part of the question. And secondly, you hold an amazing title, a Chief Sustainability Officer. And I'd really like to hear, where have you had the most impact in sustainability in your role? Over to you, May.
Thank you, Samantha. Yeah, indeed, this is a very interesting panel in the discussion, especially with this UN SDG goals. I think when it first came up, we all said, wow, wonderful, 17 goals. It's like we are going to make the world a better place. But as a practitioner, not just researching in sustainability, in fact, I just went through the list of the 17 and trying to map my research onto it. And it's like 7 or 8 of them, actually, my research is very closely related to. And as a practitioner and talking to not just academics, but also other key stakeholders, especially communities, I mean, it is a very, very interesting high-level goals, as we all said. But I think there needs to be a lot of more work that helps us to unpack it and relate it down to the daily practices and activities of every community on this in this world. So I mean, it's wonderful, these UN SDGs. It gives us a very high level direction and vision of how our work could be, during after a certain period of time. However, my biggest suggestion is then how do we unpack these goals and relate it to everyday people's behavior, practice, consumption patterns, etc., etc. So going to your second question, Samantha, in terms of my work, it's very interesting. Professionally, I'm also a researcher. So as I mentioned earlier, my research very much looks at the resilience of communities in different settings. I'm a political ecologist, so I look at how politics determine the use of the environment and the resources. A lot of my research is very much related to poverty, how then we have different development projects that actually help not just to develop a country, but in terms of just development, in terms of the different communities, how do they benefit from all these transitions? Whether is it about energy, whether is it about development, whether is it about work, you know work in that sense. So that's really what is my research is very much impactful in terms of providing suggestions, recommendations of how communities could really be more resilient in this very rapidly changing and evolving world, and the environmental impact, and how do we mitigate it. At the other end, I'm also a chief sustainability officer, as you mentioned. And I alluded earlier in our discussion, my role is especially very testing, because we are from an institution of higher learning. So it's very different from corporate, where you just focus on the ESG and the scope 1, 2, 3. And if you're banking, you very much focus on the financial compliance, the green principles, etc., and the global benchmarking or reporting. However, from my perspective, because we are university, our role is so much more expensive. We do not look at ourselves in terms of our environmental, social, and governance framework, in terms of our impact, but we also look into areas of education. How do we, as a community from the IHL, Institution of Higher Learning, how do we raise awareness, educate our future generations and leaders in terms of sustainability, in terms of what we are doing today will have long-term impact in our lives forever, not just down five generation. And also the research part, how then we hooked up this our research, especially in innovation, in mitigating these challenges from climate change, or you know the list just goes on. I'm just trying to prioritize what to bring up, but this is really such a big challenge in that sense. And the last but not least is about community impact and engagement. It's not just about students, it's not just about ourselves as educators or as an institution, but how do we work with communities then to create that impact from our education, our research, our activities? I'm sorry taking such a long time. Back to you, Samantha. Thank you.
Thank you, May, and I think you really gave us a really good overview on that and some very insightful impact there. So thank you, May. Over to you, Irene. Let's hear, following from May's discussion. She's brought up amazing insights such as impact, education, community, all of our top highlights into this amazing framework of the UN SDGs. And as May's mentioned, it's not just a framework; it's a call to action, right? Over to you, Irene.
Yes, and when you listen to the UN, they talk about us being a global citizen through the SDG goals, right? So if we're a global citizen, we're looking at, okay, what is the waste in Australia? And I'm coming from the goggles of business, right? Business and community, right? If people need stuff, they're going to go to a business and buy that stuff. And it really is up to the business to make sure that the supply chain has all those ethical components of the SDG goals addressed. That's their responsibility. And I think what we've been, and this is what the SDG goals brings up, is that we haven't put a proper price tag on virgin resources, which is why it's so cheap. All right. And that's why we have so much imbalance, like Kate Raworth and donut economics, right? Overextending, undersupplying. That's the reason why it's out of balance. So we've got Kate Raworth talking from an economics point of view, and then the SDG goals coming from a humanity point of view that can actually be overlaid on university, on social community. And it shouldn't only be up to non-profits and community groups and so all those people who scouts do cleanup on Australia Day. You know what I mean? These kids are my children grew up in scouts, and I love it. It's like the best thing. I think every child should go through scouts, right? Because how do you teach kids to think about community?
Yep.
Scouts. They learnt about how to respect our Anzacs. They sacrificed their life, not just their time, their lives, for it. Even if they came back, they were still traumatized, and that wasn't recognized. And you know what I mean? Like the SDG goals will solve so many community issues and bring business into that. And what I find is business wants to be part of the solution. I think a large portion of them do. I think they would love to tithe. They just don't know how to do it. And they don't know what that's going to look like. Whereas we're looking at within the committee getting SDG certification training to some of our board members so that they can work with the people who go through our businesses that go through our pilots or through our programs to see if you implement this methane, for example, reducing that from the atmosphere will actually, and then, diverting your waste, saving costs in your waste management by up to 30 to 70% because you're taking your FOGO waste and you're actually compressing it on site with some on-site composting. That in and of itself saves their waste management fees by that much. Imagine having that much back in your kitty every year. And you could think about, well, I was spending that already, but now I can do something good with that. So that is where we as a social enterprise come in and show them, look, this isn't a big thing for you. We're positioning ourselves to be the breaking down of simplicity of what SDG goals they can do in the first year, in the second year, in the third year, in the 10th year. And then hopefully become ambassadors for other businesses in that same industry to do it, themselves. And where I think the overlap is made for your people is that we can have students in uni learning about SDGs coming and doing work placement through some of our pilots to see how they can go through and tick the boxes of and that creates community. University, schools, university creates that roadmap. See how it's just this beautiful handing of the baton to the next gen, to the next gen, to the next gen, and nothing slips through the gaps. The SDG goals, it put goggles on work for me and business. And as I do digital marketing and data in my day job, this getting people to talk about SDG goals and showing that, hey, you've got a diverse team. You're actually knocking SDG 5 out of the park. You should look at getting certified for that. Because that's a big, big banner, especially now women are wanting more equality. People are wanting more. People with disability want equality. Mm-hmm. It's not just women. It's equality, and it's all those minorities that haven't been represented, and how it creates that neutral place, right, for that conversation to happen and transition and change to happen without being pointed out as the big guy, bad girl. It's neutral.
It's fantastic. And you bring up those great points to the gender equality, looking at that specific goal as well. The global citizen, that's where we're all positioned in this, right? And I love that merge of economics and humanity. That's really fantastic. And as a social enterprise, FYI for the rest of the panelists, Irene is known as the stealth waste broker. So, and FYI, excellent. Thank you so much for your insights there, Irene. I'm going to hand the mic over now to Garrett. Let's hear from you.
Sure. Well, I think the sustainability goals for me are sort of signposts towards our world, the world that we want to create. And for me, it's sustainability is particularly about balance, so balancing the environmental with the economic and the social. And I think I have a sense that we are already moving towards where people are acknowledging there's not just one metric or goal to live by, and it's not just economic success that's important. It is those sustainable, those environmental and those social goals that are equally important for maintaining the lifestyles we have and all the things that we really hold important. So to me, yeah, those goals are important metrics along the way that are actionable, and as I think the other panelists have said, very practical for implementation in day-to-day life. So what my club does and what I've done in a few other roles as well, the impact there focuses mainly on how people can engage more with sustainability, which is I think something we've all touched on. May, I really appreciated that you talked about your work in political ecology as well, because I think that the political side of things is very important in implementing the goals and sustainability generally. So our club aims to engage the students in appreciating the environment more by getting people out there, and then teaching people through information sessions, through networking with professionals about these are the goals, or this is what sustainability is. This is what it could look like, and would you like to help us get there? Whether that we do certainly a lot of advocacy activities, like writing to our political representatives, or even engaging with JCU as well internally with the teams here. So that's why I've had the most impact. And similarly, like I mentioned, I work for charities, the Australian Youth Climate Coalition and the Australian Marine Conservation Society, in community roles where we engage with the community. And I think there is a lot of appetite amongst the general community to take better care of our reef, our rainforest, and the world as a whole. But sometimes people don't know how to make a difference or what they can do in their lives. So I think it's about balancing those three areas, and it's about engaging people more broadly to engage in the change, because innovators, we can do a lot on our own, but I think we really do need to get community and stakeholder buy-in too.
Excellent insights there, Garrett. And I love that idea of, the world we want to create. This is, I think, a really great platform to look at and approach. And I think definitely, as you've mentioned, with your collective, you've got a great membership. So, congratulations to you for growing and really establishing that movement and collective. So
Yeah,
great, yeah, really, really great work. And the imagined world. Just imagine if we had that imagined world of the SDG goals as we move through our day. And I think that's a brilliant take on it. Thank you so much. Wow, this is starting to be a great panel already. And I'm going to move on now, just for the sake of time, into our second question, because as you know, we are launching into this really incredible opportunity. We're clustering a lot of collective intelligence from across JCU and our community to embark on the Impact 10X event that's launching on August 30th. So I'm going to reach out to you as subject matter experts, because I think it's really important for our participants to hear from you. And as May mentioned, innovation is a big part of this. So I'd really like to hear from you all now, and I'm going to flip the question order, and we'll start with Irene. So, what advice would you give researchers, students, academia, inventors, innovators, and also community entrepreneurs that are going to be joining this event, August 30? What advice would you give them? What should be focus areas and call to action? Over to you, Irene.
So the two key problems that we have, right? We've got CO2. That's usually industry and councils and how we do, like how we create energy, etc. But what can we do as citizens is we can actually. There's two problems. We've got contamination in the way our waste streams are, sent from the house and the business over to be. We're not going to call it the Waste Resource Centre anymore. We're going to call it the Waste Management Centre. We're going to call it the Resource Management Centre, because that is what waste is. When you sort it, like your bin, the only reason why you get maggots in your bin is because you've got food in there, and the food doesn't break down. It putrefies, and there's a gas that's emitted. So I got to, in my world, speak to nerdy people about why that happens. And it's like, so FOGO bin, that's one thing. So then, okay, but we live in a tropical environment. If you leave food in a bin outside on the footpath, that's also going to get that smell. So see how you break down the steps of the end user. So for scientists and innovators, it's about talking to the end user of what you're creating. What's their problem? What's their challenge? What are the solutions that the usual characters, waste management, the bin collection, what are they looking at? And I think, if all you've got is a hammer, all you see is a nail, you need to have a look at what your toolkit has to change to. So then the best way that you can identify what toolkit you need is by seeing who's going to use it. And is it replacing the existing framework? No, because we're not just talking about waste contamination. We're talking about changing the whole process. Like if we look at waste as a resource, and if you keep that in community, and community centers or community gardens actually act as a satellite that can help with the sorting of that waste resource is worth money. That money can stay in community. We could do microgrids in community that could be actually funded by this transition period that we have. And I think that's what we also need to look at, is that what we're doing with waste at the moment is because we've got a linear economy with a take, make, dispose. Whereas the circular economy is reuse, repurpose, end of life, taking it back to the manufacturer for them to break it apart and remanufacture that. That's what a real circular economy looks like. There's a few models out there, Patagonia, T-Mill, that's the clothing, they'll keep mending and fixing and extend the lifespan. We need to do that with our electricals, because that's a huge part of our waste.
Like e-waste?
E-waste, like there's, how do we make it so that it's no longer just got one life, one purpose? Like one of the key solutions is designing it properly in the first place from the goggles of how many lives and how much good we can design into this particular design. And this is where the SDG goals come in. If we're thinking about equality, if we're thinking about poverty, if we're thinking about high quality education for everybody, like all of those problems, if we think about a design from that point of view, that new product will change the supply chains, will change the end of use chain, and it will change the way that we consume things. Like if we have a library for tools and a library for other things that we don't need to own but can share, then that actually changes. We've got the industrial age 5.0 is totally different than what we've done before, but it's kind of similar to the what we used to do. So there's a really good framework that I think everybody should look at when we're going for this 10X is profits and wizards. So we got tech, but we got old school, right? We need to go back to when it wasn't broken and put back some of those things that we had. So, this person would make this, and at that end of life, this maker would take it and they would use it for something else. So instead of being in silos, we need to be overlapping. Like, that is the key thing with circular economy, is that it's not you being responsible solely for that waste. It's about who else touches it. And it's a marketing thing, right? Who else touches your business? Your clients you have aren't just your clients. They go and buy other things out there. So if they're already touching your business, then there's a way for you to have an overlap with those people, So I would think my biggest takeaway is talk to your consumers, talk to your concerned citizens, your end users. Design from the person, and it's not for everybody. There are people who are going to want what you're designing. Find them, listen to their problems, then design as much good into that solution you want to innovate. That would be my 1, 2, 3.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Irene. And I think that human-centered design and actually really bringing in the end user, building out from the human. And I love this idea of the linear economy, shifting into the circular economy, and then almost layering in all the SDG goals as your infrastructure. Amazing. And the microgrids.
Yes.
Fantastic. Yeah, thank you, Irene. Garrett, over to you. What advice would you give our participants moving into what's some of the call to action, top tier highlights you would like the teams to work on?
Certainly. I think a thought I want to share, and one that I've sort of been thinking about in my studies and life a little bit recently, is sustainability isn't a point in time goal. Like, you don't achieve a state of perfect sustainability. It's something you need to maintain and improve wherever possible. So I think the sustainability development goals are really good, and it's important we keep them in mind. But I think we also don't want to fall into the trap of thinking just about 2030 or 2050 when it comes to things like net zero. So with that in mind, something I want to encourage the panelists to do is think about the next problem. So I think, unfortunately, we've had a tendency to be very short-sighted. So to use the example of climate change, fossil fuels and the Industrial Revolution, I mean, did so many great things for humanity, and has allowed to do us so much. But as we know, using fossil fuels creates climate change. And we have known that for some time, but there was a point in time which we didn't know that. And we just saw coal, for example, as the solution. I think there's a similar thing with, for example, solar panels. Solar panels are a form of energy that aren't reliant on carbon emissions, and you can take wind turbines or others as the same. But I think it's becoming more clear there is an issue around the waste from solar panels, as well as, say, the resources you need to build them. That's not, I think, being reflected on a large scale yet. So I think where I'm going is, think that's the next problem. So yes, we may be able to implement solar energy on a large scale and hopefully avert the worst of climate change. But then what do we do about that waste? So that's one potential avenue the participants could explore. But I think there's almost certainly quite a lot of other ideas along that line, and maybe thinking about what are the great things we have now that we should be, yes, encouraging, but what might be the negative effects of those in future, and what ideas can we develop to mitigate those. Just one idea, I think it's a lot more abstract, or I'm thinking there's another word I want to go for, but yeah, very abstract, but I think it's one maybe less conventional way of going about it. So that would be my main advice.
Excellent. Thank you, Garrett. And I think to your point, we actually already have a student who's actually registered into the Impact 10X and is working on solar. So I've made a note here to make sure that I share that directly. And I know that you've been kind enough to be on our advisory and mentor panel as well. So right on the money there, Garrett. Thank you. I'm now going to hand the question over to May. What would you, and I know, thank you so much for bringing up innovation because I think it's critical. So what would be your advice, May?
Yeah, I think the 10X is really very much focused on technology. And I think that's really important because, technology will help us to come up with new ways of dealing with issues and problems. But I do want to remind that participants to this 10X that technology is just one of the pillars that make things work. Because coming up with new innovation, coming up with new technology, you still need to look into the process, into the systems, and most importantly, into the mindset. And that links very much into Irene's comments just now about consumers. Consumer behavior is really, really important. You can come up with the best technology. However, very simple reason why circular economy hasn't really caught on is this perception of consumers that, I don't want second-hand goods. It's dirty. It's been used by other people. All these very, so it's about how then we shift the mindset of people that it is important to really reconsider the values of the resources that we are using now. And when Irene was talking about that, immediately there is this term that came up into my mind, disposable nation. We are a very disposable nation. And recently we caught on the 3 R's, recycle, whatever. But there's so much more in terms of what we can do. And I guess when it comes down, it's really the cost. Because, and again, going back to Gareth and Irene, we haven't put a real value on the externalities of what we are doing to the environment by this very irresponsible consumption behavior. And only when that's properly costed, which people are trying to do now with all this carbon pricing, etc., etc. But again, to me, carbon pricing, I believe nobody in this room knows exactly how it works, right?
Right. It's very, it's a challenge. Yes.
Exactly. So when people start to understand how carbon pricing, and that's the consumer behavior or perception coming in, very important. Only when you understand how it works, what are all these exchanges doing? You travel, you say, I want to buy carbon credits to offset my footprint. How does it work? It's only when we manage to, unpack these very difficult languages to the common, not common, but the common language that we use as daily, conversation, then people will start to move. Mindset will start to shift. Okay. Last but not least, I think it's really important. I was at this very interesting lunch with the president of the Energy Institute yesterday. She mentioned something which really resonated with me, and I believe that's true. And that links to Gareth's comments about short-sightedness. A lot of us, when we look at challenges and issues, we also say, this is the challenge now. Let's come up with new technology solutions to resolve this challenge, to overcome these issues. That is a very short-term approach because sometimes you come up with new tech, you in fact create other problems. Simple example, electric cars. You need lithium, and they don't have a very long lifespan. What do you do when they no longer can store the electricity? Well, just throw it away. It's like let's have more batteries. And so you see, it becomes very short term. So this lady actually, she said, Julia Davenport, OB, she actually said, create a vision. Think 50 years down the line, the kind of life we want to live, or even 100 years down, and then work backwards to now. What are the challenges now that's inhibiting us from achieving that kind of life that we envisage in 100 years' time? And then prioritize. We cannot do everything. We really cannot do everything at the same time. So these are the this I think this is really important to have that vision, to have that long-term perspective, be able then to work backwards and see what is the most important challenge now that is stopping us from reaching there. Is it economics? If it's economics, let's deal with the economics. Is it about batteries? You know, everybody's talking about energy, right? Is it about the batteries? Then how do we resolve this problem? Is it about resource food waste, which is the most important challenge today? How do we do it? So
I think we've got May there. And yeah, so May, I think you've brought up some amazing insights again. And I just want to make sure we caught them all. But I think it also resonates what Garrett mentioned starting off was like, create that world that we want to imagine that it could be, that vision. And I think you've brought up a great point in all that reverse engineering, like looking that 100 years ahead and what is it going to be from the human behavior, from the consumer behavior, from the technology, from the innovation, from governance, as Garrett mentioned, and the circular economy, as Irene mentioned. What is it going to take to get us there? And I think you've packaged that really well. Thank you very much. Was there anything else you wanted to add there? Great, excellent. Thank you, May. That's wonderful. And I think that we'll move now on to the last question. And it directly relates to May's perspective of let's look, into the future and really what type of hopes or dreams or wishes you have for humanity, and what would you like to see happen if we were 10 years down the track, let's say, and what would you hope that we have accomplished? I'm going to hand it over now to Garrett. We're going to reverse the order. So over to you, Garrett, for the final question. What would be your hope, your dream, your wish that we finally got our heads around, that reimagined world, that vision, as May wanted to say, that create that vision?
I think starting pretty high level, I think it's really good. I think both May and Irene have already mentioned externalities and really accounting for those in the things that we buy on a daily basis, so that the good work people are doing to make the world more environmentally friendly and more socially just gets incentivized instead of currently where we've got companies, that if you can reduce your costs and do that through doing some things that kind of trash the planet, you might end up winning. So I think that's the first thing, would be, seeing more of those incentives to think innovatively and in a more sustainable way. And tied to that, I think a broader shift in the way we view the world, like I said at the start, not just about economics, but thinking about success in the environmental and the social spheres as well. And that's very intangible, I suppose, but just that shift in mindset, which I think can take a long time, but can also be quick. So I think in terms of specifics, something that I'm probably particularly interested in is sort of urban sustainability and how we build our cities and our transport in particular to be sustainable. So looking at, more active transport, more green space in cities, more localized food production, water security, all those types of things. And I suppose if panelists are, or if participants are want to go along that line, there's probably a lot of opportunities for developing products and services that help our cities be more sustainable. And I think it's also interesting to consider how COVID will continue, seeing as we're talking about cities, how COVID will continue shaping those as well, more so in that I suppose, the economic and social sphere of sustainability in particular, is it still going to be sustainable, or are we still going to have these cities where all the businesses are in the center and people live outside, or might we continue to get more people living in regional areas? What's that going to look like, and what might people need? But yeah, that's what I'm hoping for, a more balanced outlook, considering the environmental impacts, and more sustainable living spaces for everyone.
Perfect. I think that's an amazing wish to have, and a hope. And I know that our participants in cohort 10X will definitely resonate with your thoughts on that, and also the incentive piece too, right? I think that's a critical element with policy. Thank you, Garrett. May, I'm going to hand the mic over to you. What's your hopes, dreams, vision for the future? What
I'm
do you?
just going to be a bit controversial here, actually.
Oh yeah, bring it on, May.
Yeah. I'm just going to start off with a phrase, and the phrase is sustainability is a rich people's business. It has nothing to do with us who are the poorer communities or the developing part of the world. So leave us out of it. Yeah. So this is, I'm saying this as a starting, segue into the 10 years ahead, is that if we really want to make this world a better place, the technology has to focus on the masses who are not able to benefit from this whole sustainability drive.
Mm.
And the issues we are dealing with then is not how to make electric cars batteries better. It's really about water. It's really about food. It's really about, resources. It's really about poverty. It's really about education. Things that are more, doesn't just what developed world or rich people concerned about, but really the masses, I would say probably 70% of the global population.
Mm-hmm.
What major issues that are facing these people? It's only when we bring them along with us, then there will be the movement, there will be the urgency, there will be the mindset change. Then we will bring them along with us, because then they will not say sustainability. I'm hungry. How can you talk about sustainability?
Mm.
So we need to invest in food security. We need to invest in technology that actually helps to feed people at a much better price point. Just look at the inflation today. It's madness.
Mm.
Countries go bankrupt, because of that. So we are sitting here. I'm sorry, I'm a bit, that's why I said I'm going to be a bit radical. We're sitting here talking about sustainability, but at the same time, there are multiple countries in this world who are going through a very tough time, like the Ukraine and Russia war, Sri Lanka, parts of the world going through riots, political unrest because of food insecurity, because of inflation. So then how we can bring down, the prices of food, energy, those daily essentials of these people using technology. That would be very, very important for the next 10 years. Okay, enough of my controversy. I will retreat back to my bubble.
No, we need to be controversial. I think, we need to shift that mindset. So I think it's very important to really have those conversations. So thank you, May, for bringing that up. And I really appeal to our participants. Let's, as you said, a rich people's business, let's actually bring it to the masses at 70%. And if you think about it, our event is about impact. It's called Impact 10X. If we're going to have impact, we're going to be making sure that technology, innovation, that design is for impactful populations, and that's at 70%. Thank you for bringing that up. I think it's incredibly important, and it's a great highlight. Thank you, May. And I'm going to hand the mic over now to Irene. What's your vision there for 10 years down the track that we hope that we've mastered?
I'm with May 1000%. I don't think it's radical at all. I just think our goggles are going in the wrong direction. Like our pilot that we're doing with diverting food waste from landfill, my goal, my passion for the past 27 years has been, how do I make organic food achievable for everybody? And you know how that's done? That's done by making farming more efficient. Because when you make farming more efficient, they can actually give away stuff that is excess to help feed the people who are going through a tough time right now. Like, I actually think that when my vision is we become more of a share economy. What I would like in the next 10 years, all these gorgeous people out there who are doing pro bono work and not getting any recognition, or, you know, like, yes, you get maybe an award, but what if there was this app or this measurement like they have in Taiwan, like the younger people do care, and it leads, and it's those hours are counted for their retirement package, right? It's not about putting money away. It's when you have time to give, you give that time. And in another 50 years, when you need that time, you come and you bank on it, you know, like, because we're just looking at the world in money, and it's not, it's time. It's knowledge. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I would like to see in another 10 years or earlier, please, anybody, you know, like, is that I would like to see the economy no longer be about GDP. It's about how is the lowest socioeconomic person in your country going? If they don't have their basic needs, I don't know about, like, everybody's been a student. If you don't have your basic needs met, you can't think straight. You're constantly stressed out. And so how can we ask them to be sustainable? You're so on the money, May. So on the money. You know, like, so if we aren't taking care of our most vulnerable, children, women, you know, elderly, like, just to have the top three right there, if we're not taking care of them, then we're not a rich country. We're missing the boat. And then when we look to our neighbors in the Pacific and in Asia, they've got solutions. They know it. They live it. They don't have a word called waste in India. We do, you know, because we don't have an economy that deals with the second, third, fourth life. You know, we are being very selfish. And until we think like a global citizen, you know, that is why sustainability will always be a rich person's problem. And if you're living in Australia, no matter what your socioeconomic status, you're richer than 75% of the world, no matter what, because you can have free medical, no matter, you can walk into a hospital and get, you know what I mean? Like, we are richer, but we still have gaps. The cost of living is just ridiculous because we have verticals. Energy could be free because we've got solar, and, you know, we can do things. We can do microgrids instead of having everything being shipped around and moved around. We've got really wasteful systems, and we reduce that waste. We put that money back into community, into schools, into single women who are in dangerous situations and need to get out safely and fast, all of that, you know, like, that is what I would see and like to see in 10 years. That, you know, there's already some great things happening. I would like them to be funded and to be part of the everyday system. Like, what is it Shane that presented yesterday?
Yeah, Shane.
Yeah.
Yes,
His
exactly.
system of getting the information from different government bodies so that
Yes.
children do not fall through the cracks when they are in a dangerous home environment.
Right.
You know, and then it's not just treating the child, it's treating the family.
Mm.
You know, and then when we have this collective thinking in our individualistic world, we will solve a lot of problems. And I think this way of measuring hours, rather than I will give you $10 or I'll donate to this conservation, I will give, you know, 100 hours a year to help plant trees or to help decontaminate waste or blah, 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 blah. And I get a discount off my rates because I do that. You know, like, those kind of things where it's not just I have to work in this job to be able to pay that one bill. How are other ways I can pay off that bill? and be part of the solution,
Which,
and activate these energies instead of just saying, here's the doll, da 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 da. And it's not just doll. It could be, a retired person has all this wisdom, yet they're put on a shelf and not brought, their wisdom isn't brought back into society. That's such a wasteful part of how we live. We should have grandparents in schools reading to kids, just imagine all that. And just as we say that the innovations we create could have, problems down the track, the innovations we create could have exponential benefits if we think about it from SDGs, the vulnerables, and who's got the energy, who's got the time. And half the time they just, like Garrett said, they just need a framework on how they can be helpful. Les Robinson, the behavioral scientist that we're bringing up to Cairns for a workshop, he said 80% to 90% of people want to be part of the solution. All we have to do is give them a framework. And I think we're going to see some magical stuff in the next 10 years, just magical. And that's harnessing human spirit. You look at TikTok, you look at, TikTok. I'm going to go TikTok because that is just showing some amazing human wisdom being shared, people boosting strangers up. It's not like Instagram or Facebook. It's not about, hey, look how awesome my life is. It's people saying my life is shit. Oh, so's mine. But hey, here's some things that help me. It's already showing what the power of community can do. It's empowering people, and I think if we give that kind of concept of that platform in other ways, I think we could solve so much with very little money.
Excellent. And I think you bring up some amazing points, and this is why we have this very, very insightful panel, because the collective intelligence here today has actually created a new metric, not GDP, but SDP. There you go. I love it. And also, I love that idea of the shared economy. And I think you brought that to the forefront, Irene. I think that's just really impactful. And I think we've got lots of work to do, rolling up our sleeves, call to action. And we've got this great opportunity to do so. How lucky are we, right?
What does SDP mean? You didn't give us the meaning of the acronym.
So instead of a GDP, you do a SDP. So where you're measuring not a GDP of a country, but you're measuring, like you mentioned.
Social.
Isn't that amazing? We just, hey, panel, we just created a new metric. Because it brings in what May's saying, that 70%,
Yes.
So instead of, gross domestic product, it's our social domestic product. What we're all bringing to the fore today is about that social interconnectedness, the shared economy, and that 70% of our population that we really need to build that tech and innovation for. I think we've got some great insights in our launch of our panel today in relation to our Impact 10X session coming up. So we've done the rounds of the questions, but now this is where I'd love to open the floor. Was there any other insights that you wanted to share? And May, you were bringing up, the carbon pricing and carbon credits, and I think you brought up an excellent point where in relation to clarity and ESGs as well, and the greenwashing we're seeing. Which is a whole nother panel, right? But in essence, I was reading through, and I know that we've all looked at the Sustainability 2022 report that came out, some beautiful infographics. And it was interesting to see that Australia is at 75%. And we should be reaching our 100%, correct? So I think that is a really good call to action. And I had a discussion just recently with Professor Talal Yusuf from Aviation Australia. And he was actually sharing with me that universities now are actually using the SDG framework to be measured against. I didn't realize that, and you probably know more about that, May. But I thought that was really fascinating. I learned that fact yesterday. So I'm going to leave the floor open to any closing comments, any further insights. So please, the floor is yours.
Maybe I'll just jump in quickly first in terms of what you, as a follow-up to what Samantha has said. Indeed, it's true that universities, they are on the board, basically, in terms of not just being measured by sustainability impact, but also even the rankings. We have impact rankings by the THE that looks at how good universities are doing in terms of sustainability. And the universities, I've seen some very progressive universities, in fact, map SDGs, the 17 goals, to everything they do. I've seen articles that's been published and say this article, research articles by academics saying that this research relates to SDG goal 1, 7, 12, yada, yada, yada. So then my question to universities that this is great exercise, partly because increasingly the young generation also want to be in universities who are sustainability aware and pursuing the agenda as well, because they believe they have a part to do, in terms of sustainability. My main concern is don't let this turn into a branding exercise. That's all I'm asking. Do not let this turn into a branding exercise, because it's just exactly what you say, Samantha. It's going to be greenwashing. It's going to be heartbreaking for me, basically, if that's the case, because then it really defeats the purpose of IHL, universities, our roles and responsibilities towards the society. So that's all I'm just going to say. Thank you. Passing it back to Irene, or anything else to add from your side?
Hey, mate, I'd love you to check out Green KPI. That's a local entrepreneur in Far North Queensland who's taken the BRI report, checklist, and built it into an app that businesses can use. And what it does is it populates a sustainability report on the website, and it shows the actions that the teams, whether you're a solopreneur or a large corporation, and what you're doing as you go through the business. And I think sustainability reports, actually, I know they're actually a KPI that businesses in Australia will need to have in the next couple of years. And I think as long as we have, and Johanna Clute is so passionate. She is just, she is a sustainability officer, but she is so passionate about getting more companies using Green KPI, and she's part of our pilot. And because we're very data driven, like what we're doing with our case study is about the food waste diversion and reduction, but also how we can turn that into commercial and domestic compost that people can use at home. I think as we make consumers more educated, they're going to do their own research. And if we have gatekeepers that make sure that when they're doing and this is another investment we're going to be doing, we're raising funds for it to bring a woman from Sweden. Her course is how to get SDG certified. So have SDG certifiers in Far North Queensland that can go through and audit a business. And if they don't have our stamp on it that they've been audited by a certified SDG officer, then they can't make that claim, and it should be, and then it could, you know what I mean? It has to be things like that where there are, and we're working towards making Far North Queensland have a circular economy centre of excellence here. And we're talking with, there's a great educator in New Zealand that we're talking to. There's people in Sweden, you know what I mean? We're not just looking here. It's part of our, walking our talk that we're working with the global community who are 30 years down the track in sustainability, than what we are. And I see that as an opportunity for us. We can leapfrog that 30 years of experience. And there are I actually think we're at this great tipping point, May. And I think there's going to be really hard for people to, as long as we have these certifications, it's going to be really hard for people to greenwash. B Corp. B Corp has got a 6-month waiting list for businesses getting their applications. And that's a very strict process to go through. So is SDG. you know. And if we have these, and this lady, she's actually been certified through the UN. So there's going to be these people as we go over these next 5 to 10 years, that greenwashing, I would not do it in your business, because I actually think, just like in digital marketing, if you were doing black hat SEO and you were caught out by a Google update, your business disappeared overnight, you know. And I think that is where the that goalpost, or those gatekeepers, really can be, you know, just the ones that go, no, this business isn't it. And it needs to be on some national website that says, once you get your certification, you're on this website. If they make that claim, you can go and check this website, search up their business name, bippity boppity boo, busted, you know. So that kind of concern, I think, will actually get rid of those probably 5 to 10%, I would think, that would do the greenwashing, because the economic value to do better for people and for planet, the linear economy is actually very expensive. The circular economy is actually economically viable, you know, for more businesses, when they realize how they can reduce waste, be more efficient, whilst also creating a really awesome work culture.
Excellent closing comments. Thank you, Irene. I'm going to hand the floor over to Garrett just for his closing comments, because I'm seeing it's coming up to an hour, and I know that we could probably be in the Sustainability Lounge for days here.
I know.
And
I want to hang out with you three on a lot more regular basis.
Absolutely. You're always welcome back in the Sustainability Lounge, and we'll be doing an update, and we'll be inviting you all back to our demo day, so you can actually see how you've inspired the innovators, entrepreneurs, and inventors, and what they've actually come up with as solutions, tech solution, innovation solutions. So, Garrett, over to you for some closing comments.
Sure. I think, Irene, what you're saying is actually really interesting, kind of regulating sustainability claims, maybe more so along the lines of what you might now for, say, a financial license or something like that, was what it sounded like to me, which is a very interesting concept, and probably something, a discussion for another time. I think what I wanted to close with was just to say probably biggest or an important thing for participants is, don't just think about technologically or logistically how your innovation can function, but what motivates and incentivizes or enables people to use those. I think we've all touched on in one way or another. I think good line of thinking to have in mind.
Absolutely, more human-centered, and also asking the customer, connecting with the customer, right? I think that's just so important, not to get just caught up in building and constructing research and the technology, but reaching out to the customer. What's the problem? What problem are we solving? And what that solution looks like. Very well said, Garrett. And I know that you've got an event coming up too, in your Nature and Adventure Collective. So I know that you'll be very busy working on that. So thank you very much. So in closing, and we just come up to the hour, perfect timing. I really want to just really thank you so much, because you've really enabled us to think differently, to have a call to action, and really this panel has, I think, really highlighted some very, very, very important aspects of sustainability. And I'd like to thank you all. So thank you, Professor May. Thank you, Irene. Thank you, Garrett. I really, really appreciate it. And as I said, always welcome back here in the Sustainability Lounge. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.